Charlie Munger, who's the vice chairman at Berkshire Hathaway, has a great mental model that he uses when thinking through solving problems. It's called inversion thinking. And inversion thinking is when you look at a problem or a decision from the opposite point of view. So here's an example. If your goal is to achieve success, and if you were to invert success and identify the opposite, which is failure, so now all you have to do is avoid failure, which is the inverse of success. And if you do that, then success becomes inevitable. So inversion thinking, what it allows you to do is removes obstacles between you and the desired outcomes that you have, which is your goals. Now, here's a different perspective. If your goal is to live an extraordinary life, then what's the opposite of that? What's the inverse of living an extraordinary life? That would be living a mediocre life. So in that case, the question arises, how does one actually live a mediocre life? All right. Now, that's going to open up a big Pandora's box, because if you are to define what an extraordinary life is, it's very subjective to every individual, because someone's average can be extraordinary to another. So for myself, because I can only define what an extraordinary life looks like for me, is an extraordinary life is not living a passive life, but to actually live a life of design. And if you view the world in a similar lens as I do, then you'll also agree that in order to live an extraordinary life, you're going to have to think and act the way that the 99% of the population is not thinking. And you're going to have to stop doing the destructive thinking that the 99% of the population spends most of their time thinking, because you're going to have to do things differently. And it seems very simple, but it's actually very hard to do, because part of thinking differently and not thinking like the 99% involves a lot of effort, and it forces you to look at things from a different perspective, right? And here's one of those different perspectives that I want to give to you. In the state that we are in as a species, we as humans are overfed and undernourished. And this goes for everything. We are overfed when it comes to food. We are overfed when it comes to sex. We are overfed, especially when it comes to information. Every second of every day, more incessant, unnecessary information that we sit back with our hands tied behind our backs and we swallow at a dangerously rapid speed with no end in sight. Because the problem is the world around us keeps getting louder and louder. It keeps pushing down the internal noise that we have, which leads us to being unhappier, lonelier, and we're overstimulated than we've ever been. Now let's talk about filtering information is a skill that we have never developed. In the age of information, our brain is 300,000 years old, and our operating system is not up to date with actually what's going on. And it's not designed to take in the amount of inputs that we have every single day. And filtering information is a skill that we have not been taught. It's not a skill that we have learned. Yet the demand to suck our attention keeps growing. There's endless options. There's endless things to consume, from Netflix to YouTube to podcasts, all of these different elements, but no one is showing us how to filter the information that we are presented with. And filtering information is more important than ever, because the ideas that are being pushed around, we have no control over, because now wars are not going to be fought with guns. It's actually going to be fought with stories and narratives, right? Because imagine, think about this for a second. If you're being force-fed food 24/7 and you don't have the ability to stop, that would suck. That would be very extremely uncomfortable, because without filtering information, you don't know if the ideas are genuinely yours or you're just playing the game of telephone with millions of other people around you. And so if the goal is to live an extraordinary life, one that is actually meaningful, that you have designed yourself, and one that's focused around creating happiness internally first, then you can't do what the 99% are doing. 99% of people are allowing the information to sweep them off their feet and letting themselves get ragdolled by life. We're more concerned with external affairs than what's actually happening in our own lives. And the lack of self-control, or the lack of being able to filter information, and you can see it through their misguided priorities. People will tolerate poor health, they'll tolerate poor relationships, poor mental health, poor money habits, but they won't tolerate their favorite show getting canceled or being able to go grab something that they actually don't need. And there's a great quote from the book, Stillness is the Key, where Ryan Holiday says, you don't solve a maze by rushing through. You have to stop and think. You have to walk slowly and carefully, ringing in your energy. Otherwise, you're going to be hopelessly lost. Now, I am not a saint. This took me years to understand. And what helped me understand this concept was understanding the mental model of garbage in equals garbage out, right? Which is another underlying mental framework of inputs equals outputs. And like many people, I was being ragdolled by life. I was comparing myself to people who were 20 years years ahead of me in the game, feeling insignificant at my accomplishments, where I was comparing my 2 years of effort to their 20 years of consistency. Now, information is helpful, but the right information is helpful. The information that you have filtered to help you for the season of life that you are in. We can't control what happens in the world, but we can control what happens in our lives. And there's another great quote by Thich Nhat Hanh where he says, before we can make a deep change in our lives, we must look into our diets, into our way of consuming. We have to live in such a way that we stop consuming the things that poison us or intoxicate us. Then we will have the strength to allow the best in us to arise, and we will no longer be victims of anger or frustration. So now that you're all up to speed, you're most likely wondering, how do we filter information, right? How do we control the force feeding that is being done to us? We have control over that, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So for the few of you that are wanting to live an extraordinary life, here's my system on how I filter information to lead a happier life. So here are the 4 steps to filtering information and taking control of your attention, okay? Step number 1, you have to go into an information fast. Start by eliminating all forms of consumption, and you do that immediately with social media, news, and anything else that sucks a lot of time and attention. Eliminate the information sources that really bring you down or that don't add value to your life first. So if you're watching the news and negative news all the time, because that's what's on the news, that's something that you should be eliminating first. So if you're a user of social media, then delete all social media apps from your phone. If you're a news junkie, then put the TV remote in an inconvenient place. I personally recommend doing this for 2 to 3 weeks. I did it for 2 months just to actually clear my head. Now, this is going to be very difficult, especially for the first week. You're going to be reaching for your phone as if it's vibrating when nothing is really happening, which is called phantom vibration. Now, one study actually shows that people would rather give themselves an electric shock than experience boredom for even a few minutes. All right. So we have to step away from the comfort of noisy distractions and stimulations, and we have to start listening to ourselves, and we have to take a step back from this overconsumption so you can actually clear your head. Create friction between you and your consumption so it's harder to consume things. Step 2, use your time wisely. Now, what's going to happen is by eliminating or reducing the consumption of information, this is going to give you a lot of your time back. Don't fill it up by doing destructive things. All right. Use this time to invest into your health, your happiness, your wealth. Get outside, get some sunlight, get some more sleep, connect with your children or your family. Take the time to check in with yourself, right? With your emotional state. Research how to build a business. Be selfish with your time, because time is the only resource that is limited regardless of race, gender, or ethnicity. Step 3, selectively add back in. So after you finish the fasting period, now you have a blank slate. This has now allowed you to actually be selective with the things that you want to add back in. So for example, the only form of consumption that I keep on my phone is the Kindle app, because I get a lot of my information for books. Everything else I keep off of my phone, especially social media. I find that when I use my computer instead of my phone, the user experience is not that friendly, which doesn't make it appealing to navigate or get me hooked. So for me personally, what I have removed from my phone is social media. I've removed the Amazon app, and I've removed the food ordering apps, which is Grubhub and Uber Eats, because if you create that friction between you and being able to go and do those things, that has saved me more money. It saved me a lot of time because I'm not on social media. And now I'm forced to be healthier because I can't just be convenient and order food. Step 4, limited consumption time. Time is the best tool for filtration. Limiting the time that I consume things that don't add value to my life has been very helpful. And here's how I segment the time for different forms of consumption. So for social media, I'll only limit it to 1 hour per week, which is to find topics to research or places to travel. YouTube is 3 to 4 hours per week, usually during breakfast, primarily consuming podcasts or things that I'm researching. News, 0 hours per week. I do not consume news whatsoever or world affairs that do not impact my life directly. And books are my unlimited source of consumption. The truth is, none of this will be easy, especially if you have a social circle that's all about being in the know-how. All those people where you have the social pressures to people are sending you news articles of what's going on around in your neighborhood, what's going on in the world, and you want to keep up with all of that. Now, by filtering information, this will put a lot of social pressure on you because you might end up being the guy or gal who's living underneath a rock. However, in my opinion, if having that social pressure and not having those people around me that want to be in the know-how, if that is the price that I have to pay to not live like the 99% of people, to be able to live a life where I get to make conscious, intentional choices resources in every aspect of my life, then I think it's a price worth paying, because time is the greatest resource ever for all of us. The second is our attention, because what you pay attention to grows. And if this is true, then what can happen is we squander our time paying attention to random things. And if we are to live a life of design, then we must control the things that take up at our attention. So for those that are still listening, the best time to filter information was yesterday. The second best time to do it is now. So follow the 4 steps, use that as a baseline, and design a system that works for you. And if you found this helpful, feel free to share it with someone who you think might find this very insightful and very useful. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, till next time.